I call this business meeting of the Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry to order. The purpose of today's meeting is to consider the United States Grain Standards Reauthorization Act for 2020, which includes authorities to crucial operation of grain export inspections and weighing facilities set to expire in September. The reauthorization and amendments made by this legislation will enhance certainty and predictability and transparency throughout the federal grain inspection system. They also help to maintain our country's reputation as a reliable exporter of quality grain. We have listened to input from the stakeholders, the farmers, our ranchers. We have drafted a bipartisan bill to address these concerns. Farm groups and participants throughout the grain value chain have signaled support for the bill, and I ask unanimous consent that these letters be placed in the record. Without objection, so ordered. I would like to thank our stakeholders, members of the Ag Committee, especially Senator Stabenow, for the collaborative work in getting us here today. With that, I recognize the distinguished ranking member for any comments that she may have.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership and the bipartisan work on this bill. We know that our agricultural economy continues to struggle. Years of market instability and extreme weather events on top of the chaotic approach to trade have taken a real toll on our ability to export agricultural products. And that was before the COVID-19 pandemic caused a massive disruption to our food supply chain. While there's much more that's needed to be done to help our farmers and families recover, I'm pleased this legislation continues our trusted inspection system and reaffirms the role of the federal government in inspecting exported grain. This bipartisan bill protects the interests of American farmers and ensures our credibility as a reliable producer of high-quality grains and oilseeds. I would also like to acknowledge the ongoing labor negotiations at export grain terminals in the Pacific Northwest. I've heard troubling reports that certain foreign-owned grain companies may be failing to make good faith efforts to reach an agreement with their workers. It's concerning to hear they are threatening workers' pensions and access to health care. These protracted and contentious negotiations ultimately harm the workers, the American farmers who want certainty, and the American companies that have already put in the work to come to an agreement. I would urge all parties to engage in the process in good faith. If left unresolved, these negotiations will undermine certainty for everyone involved in the grain trade, which is the purpose of our meeting today. So, Mr. Chairman, I join you in urging all of our colleagues to support this bill so that it will advance and hopefully be signed into law by September 30th. Thank you.
I thank the ranking member, the distinguished ranking member. Seeing a business quorum is now present, the committee will proceed to consideration of the United States Grain Standards Reauthorization Act for 2020. The text of the bipartisan chairman's mark has been distributed to all members. I note that a reporting quorum is present. Seeing no further debate or amendment, I move the United States Grain Standards Reauthorization Act for 2020 be reported favorably as an original bill. Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the United States Grain Standards Reauthorization Act of 2020 is ordered to be reported favorably as an original bill. I ask unanimous consent that in preparing the measure for reporting, the staff be authorized to make such technical, clarifying, and conforming changes as appropriate. Seeing no objection, so ordered. I now recognize Senator Braun for a brief comment.
And it will be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the courtesy, and Ranking Member Stabenow to do this immediately after the vote. I want to briefly talk about the Grain Standards Reauthorization Act. I appreciate that the committee was able to come to an agreement. I supported it. I'm deeply concerned, though, by what is happening to the workers at some of our nation's largest grain export terminals in the Pacific Northwest, as Senator Stabenow just related. It's my understanding that 6 terminals owned either by Louis Dreyfus, a Dutch firm, and 2 Japanese conglomerates, Marubeni and Mitsui, have refused to negotiate in good faith with the men and women who have worked in these ports for years, and representing a union that's been negotiating for 70 years. These companies with annual revenues in the tens of billions are asking these skilled workers to give up pensions and their health care. Meanwhile, the U.S.-owned terminals reached an agreement with the union more than 2 years ago. As this committee knows, the value of the Grain Standards Act is that our trading partners can count on the integrity of U.S. grains. If we allow this act to be undermined, whether by future privatization of inspectors or by the undermining of the skilled workforce at these terminals, we ultimately hurt the very farmers that all of us count on. These workers have been on the job without a contract for 2 years. It's past time for these terminal operators to come back to the negotiating table and hash out a fair and amicable agreement with workers. It's my hope my colleagues will join me in prioritizing these workers over the profits of these foreign-owned corporations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the senator. The business meeting is now adjourned, and the committee will now proceed with its hearing. I call this hearing of the U.S. Senate Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry to order. Today we will hear stakeholder perspectives on S. 3894, the Growing Climate Solutions Act introduced by Senator Braun and co-sponsored by our committee ranking member, Senator Stabenow. I want to thank our witnesses for their willingness to participate in our first ever hearing conducted in this fashion, where some participants are here in person and obviously some are joining us remotely through technology. I want to thank Senator Braun especially for his hard work, and you would expect that from somebody who is a farmer and a forester from Indiana. Mike, thank you very much. Senate S. 3894 would assist growers in monetizing voluntary conservation practices on their farms, ranches, forests, and businesses. This legislation establishes a program at the Department of Agriculture to certify third-party technical service providers who assist farmers to capture carbon credits through voluntary conservation practices. The challenges that have confronted the entire food value chain during the COVID-19 pandemic have demonstrated the vital importance of a stable and resilient food production. And over the past several months, farmers and ranchers have continued to do their work, and agriculture value chain does continue to operate, though not without severe challenges. Agricultural productivity has largely been stable. Our cows continue to graze in pastures and be finished in feed yards in Kansas and all other states. Crops continue to be planted and harvested. These kind of things don't wait. At the same time, we've seen unprecedented disruption to the economy, and limits to our commuting, vacationing, international travel has resulted in drastic short-term declines in global greenhouse emissions. A recent study published in the journal Nature Climate Change has estimated that our global emissions have been cut by 17% as human travel during the global pandemic has slowed. Maintaining the health of our planet for future generations is, of course, paramount. So is feeding the billions of people that populate the earth today and in the years ahead. In order for these two distinct needs to be met, there must be meaningful acknowledgement and support for the role technology plays in feeding more and more hungry people. Growing demand and production must be balanced with consideration for impacts on soil, water, and other natural resources. I want to emphasize the importance of accurate data in any climate-related discussion. How much have improved farming technologies and practice already accomplished in sequestering carbon? What role should the Department of Agriculture have in gathering data and conducting analysis on greenhouse emissions? There is certainly no other agency or committee in Congress that prioritizes and understands farmers, our producers, ranchers, private foresters, and rural agriculture businesses, as well as the Department of Agriculture and our agriculture committees. Farmers and ranchers manage unique risk, such as the weather, the global marketplace, agricultural production, tariffs. Further regulatory burdens can add costs and hinder common sense innovation. Today, we will learn more about the actions that are already underway in the agriculture sector to address some of these challenges and opportunities. With that, I recognize the ranking member of our committee, Senator Stabenow, for any remarks.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate your holding this important hearing today, and it's my great pleasure to be partnering with Senator Braun in this effort. Our world has changed drastically since the last time this committee met, that's for sure. The COVID-19 crisis has affected every family in America. It's also tested the resiliency of our food supply, strength of our farmers. During this crisis, Congress has worked to address the countless challenges facing our food system. While we've passed several important relief packages, there's still more to do. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you to pass additional legislation that supports our families, farmers, and essential food workers in these difficult times. We should also look for ways to support and fill in the gaps that remain in our supply chain, such as those included in my Food Supply Protection Act, which I introduced earlier this year, that I hope we'll have an opportunity to discuss. As we continue to address these urgent challenges, this crisis has also underscored the importance of providing long-term stability for our farmers who face uncertainty every single day. I often say that agriculture is the riskiest business there is, and farmers know all too well how sudden a shift in the weather can change everything in the blink of an eye. Unfortunately, the climate crisis has caused these extremes to happen more and more often, as we know. While farmers are uniquely affected by the climate crisis, they are also a critically important part of the solution. With the right support, our producers can cut down on their emissions and benefit from the adoption of practices to store more carbon in soil and trees. This is good for the environment, and it's good for the farmers' bottom line. The 2018 Farm Bill created new opportunities for climate-smart agriculture, including the landmark soil health demonstration trials. However, much more is needed. That's why Senator Braun and I introduced the bipartisan Growing Climate Solutions Act, along with our colleagues Senator Graham and Senator Whitehouse, to help farmers and foresters scale up sustainable practices and make money through voluntary carbon markets. In the coming days, I'm really pleased that Representative Spanberger and Representative Bacon will introduce the bipartisan bill in the House. Senator Braun and I have both been working with them for that to happen. We're very pleased that we will have a bipartisan bill in the House of Representatives very soon. Carbon markets offer agriculture producers an opportunity to create additional revenue streams. With all the uncertainty from COVID-19 and trade and weather, farmers need new market opportunities now more than ever. At the same time, companies across the country are looking for ways to offset their emissions through carbon markets. That means farmers and foresters have an exciting opportunity to be rewarded for the voluntary, sustainable steps they're taking through generating and selling carbon credits. For example, Detroit's own General Motors paid for an agricultural carbon project like this based on grasslands in North Dakota a few years ago, one of the first of its kind. Our bill will help the corn and soybean farmer in Michigan who's hearing about companies like GM and is asking me how they can get involved in this and have a credible process to store their carbon and have it measured accurately, and they want to know how to get started. That's what the Growing Climate Solutions Act does. The bill will set up a certification program at the USDA that will identify trusted outside experts for farmers to work with to help them through the carbon credit process. This will jumpstart carbon smart projects on farms and ranches and private forests all over the country. Producers can easily navigate a new one-stop shop at USDA's website where they can learn about carbon markets and the type of practices farmers can adopt to get paid. USDA certified technical assistance providers can help farmers decide what practices will work for them. After the practices are in place, and a USDA certified third party verifies that they've followed all the appropriate procedures, they can enter in the marketplace and sell carbon to a private buyer. In order to start addressing the climate crisis in agriculture, I believe we need to focus first on voluntary, producer-led, and bipartisan policies that have broad support. The Growing Climate Solutions Act has the support of over 50 farm and environmental groups, including the American Farm Bureau, the National Farmers Union, Land of Lakes, and the Environmental Defense Fund, all of whom will be sharing their perspectives today. Mr. Chairman, we've received letters and testimony from numerous companies and organizations expressing support for the bill, and I would ask that all of these be submitted for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. Our farmers know that sustainability and profitability go hand in hand. This bill will help farmers improve their operations, build new revenue streams, all while addressing the root cause of the serious climate crisis. I look forward to discussing this common sense bipartisan bill today, and I look forward to continuing, Mr. Chairman, to work with you and Senator Braun and all of our colleagues to see that it is enacted as soon as possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. I welcome our panel of witnesses to the committee this morning, and I recognize Senator Braun for introducing our first witness, Mr. Brent Bible.
Thank you, Chairman Roberts. Appreciate the committee's desire to consider this legislation, and I'm proud to introduce Brent Bible to the committee this morning. Brent is a first-generation Hoosier farmer who operates Stillwater Farms, a 5,000-acre grain production farm in Lafayette, Indiana. Since returning to the farm in 2007, Brent has been a leader in modern, sustainable farming. He was an early adopter of cover crops and uses modern technologies to reduce fertilizer use and carefully manage soils. In fact, Brent was instrumental in the development of the Growing Climate Solutions Act itself, as he understands the benefits that access to carbon markets can bring for American agriculture. Over the last 6 years, Stillwater Farms has partnered with the National Corn Growers Soil Health Partnership as a demonstration farm to continue working on these techniques. Brent is also farmer advisor to the Environmental Defense Fund. Mr. Chairman, as a fellow Hoosier, I'm looking forward to Brent Bible's testimony this morning. Thank you.
Our next witness is no stranger to the committee. President Zippy Duvall of the American Farm Bureau Federation, a third-generation farmer from Greensburg, Georgia. He raises both cattle and broilers on his operation. Zippy has served as president of the AFBF for over 4 years. He has helped lead their policy initiatives on issues like agriculture sustainability. Prior to his current role, Zippy has a history of serving farmers through roles in both the American and Georgia Farm Bureau. Thank you for being here, Mr. Duvall. Our next witness will be introduced by our distinguished ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to welcome Rob LaRue to the committee this morning. Rob was elected National Farmers Union's 15th president earlier this year and previously served as NFU's Senior Vice President of Public Policy and Communications. Prior to joining NFU, Rob was the staff director of the House Agriculture Committee under the leadership of Chairman Colin Peterson, where he oversaw the panel's efforts during the 2008 and 2014 farm bills. Rob was raised on a dairy farm in Greenville, West Virginia, and we're very happy to have him with us this morning. Welcome.
Our next witness is Mr. Jason Weller. Our final witness this morning, he is the Vice President of Truterra LLC, which serves as the sustainability business of Land O'Lakes. In his role, he helps develop conservation solutions for the cooperative's members and owners. Jason is no stranger to Washington, having served in roles in the USDA's Natural Resource Conservation Service, the White House Office of Management and Budget, and 2 House committees. I welcome all the witnesses, and Mr. Bible, why don't you start off?
Thank you, Chairman Roberts, Ranking Member Stabenow, Senator Braun, and all the members of the committee for the invitation to testify before you today. I applaud you for making sense of this new normal. I know this is a first time for you in terms of the way that this hearing's done. It's the first time I've testified before a committee, so it doesn't seem any different to me. What I will say is that as farmers, we tend to when we come up to a fence, we don't stop or turn around. We find the gate and walk through it. And I think that's what you've done by continuing this normally as possible throughout this process. As a first-generation farmer, I see myself as a typical but fairly representative and vital part of the food supply chain. My business partner and I operate Stillwater Farms, as Senator Braun mentioned, growing corn and soybeans, mainly for seed production, ethanol, and food products over about 5,000 acres in 3 counties in west central Indiana. I'm also a member of the Indiana Corn Growers Association and Indiana Farm Bureau, and by extension, their national organizations, and I appreciate their support for farmers and for the work we're trying to accomplish today. I'm educated with a Bachelor's of Science from Purdue University in Ag Economics. Purdue taught me very well to be analytical, to be data-driven, and to make decisions based on economic science. Globally, farmers are more challenged than ever. We see increasing demand for our products, but face massive headwinds, including trade barriers and climate change, similar to what Senator Stabenow alluded to earlier. As these pressures mount, we continue to try to improve on how we manage our lands so that we can remain in business. And that's what sustainability is all about, doing more with less, finding ways to be sustainably, economically sustainable and environmentally sound as well. On my farm, we invest in conservation practices that lead to soil health, water quality, air quality, and reduced greenhouse gas emissions. This interest and investment led us to become a member of the Soil Health Partnership, a partnership between the National Corn Growers Association, Environmental Defense Fund, and other critical stakeholders. My farm has spent the last 6 years conducting research trials on soil health and farming practices that benefit the environment in my area and in the world around me. I've also spent that time as a voluntary advisor, farmer advisor to the Environmental Defense Fund. What's interesting there is that we many times share different perspectives on farming and agriculture in general, but we find ways to work together to create good solutions that are complementary to both entities. And I think that's an important distinction to make, especially in today's environment. These practices and initiatives that we reach will not reach a broader farming audience if we can't figure out how to scale up the current rates of adoption and conservation practices. And that's why I like the Growing Climate Solutions Act. It opens the door for farmer participation in a market-based system that rewards farmers for implementing conservation practices on their farms if they choose to do so. Because of these results, we need Congress to step in and provide policies that incentivize further adoptions. And we have great programs at USDA that provide cost share for farmers to implement conservation practices. But government programs are not the only solution to our problem. We need real market-based options that allow farmers to individually make a choice and participate and then see the benefits to their economic bottom line. I urge the committee to examine this bill and work together to pass legislation that will put my farm and the environment both on a path to success. Thank you.
President Duvall.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member of Stabenow. I want to thank y'all for the opportunity to visit with you today through the internet, so we appreciate the opportunity. I also want to thank you and other members of the committee for all the things that you've done for our American farmers and ranchers during this very difficult time. With all the market disruptions due to COVID-19, the pandemic, and already through a distressed farm economy. Keeping our farmers and ranchers in production is vital to our food security and our national security, as all you members of the committee already know that. Thank you for supporting the measures to assist our farm businesses. At the same time, farmers and ranchers working to keep our food on our plates, they continue to make great strides in sustainability, which brings me to the topic for today's hearing. I would like to provide a short snapshot view of agriculture's leadership and sustainability farming practices. American agriculture accounts for less than 10% of the total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, far less than transportation, electrical generation, and other industries. Total carbon sink efforts by forest land management land converted to forest, grasslands, and management of wetlands more than offset agriculture's total greenhouse gas emissions. Farmers continue to produce more food and fiber and energy with more efficiency than our parents and our grandparents did over 2 generations ago. We have increased production 270% without using more resources. In fact, we would have to have nearly 100 million acres in 1990 to match the same production that we had in 2018. Our advancements in sustainability are due to the adoption of technologies, and they are due to farmers overwhelmingly participating in voluntary incentive-based conservation programs. As we continue to navigate trade challenges and the economic impacts that COVID-19 brings to American farmers and ranchers, we also face a very difficult headwind. Yet we remain committed to smart farming. Whether our farms are passed on to us by our parents or whether we started our own farms, our farms and our land is our heritage. Every farmer knows wants to leave their land, their air, and their water, and also their farm and ranch businesses in better shape, better condition than they found it. In fact, to achieve that goal, Congress must protect agriculture's unique from undue burdensome regulation, and also we have to respect farmers and ranchers' ability to innovate and solve problems. Farm Bureau's grassroots policy development supports market-based incentives and compensation for farmers for planting crops and adopting farming practices that keep carbon in the soil. That is why we welcome opportunities to participate in emerging carbon markets. The Growing Climate Solution Act would create a certified program at USDA to help solve technical barriers to farmers. The forest landowners participation in carbon credit markets are important, and the bill also provides the Secretary of Agriculture and an advisory council that is made up of agricultural experts, scientists, producers, and others to ensure the certification program works for all participants. The Growing Climate Solution Act seeks to provide more clarity and guidance for farmers and ranchers who want to provide the ecosystem services that are more and more consumers and businesses are demanding. This builds upon America's agriculture's strong foundation of environmental stewardship and innovation. I want to thank Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding today's hearing. I'll be glad to take any questions after the other panelists speak. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Zippy. Our next witness is Mr.